tonight's event. Looks like it's up to me now to organise the revolution, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
I begin by telling you just a little bit about the community platform. I work for the community platform as a network of 30 national organisations, such as the National Women's Council, the Irish National Organisation of the Unemployed, the Migrant Rights Centre, Debt and Development Coalition, Focus Ireland, dealing with all the issues of poverty and inequality. And I suppose what's unique about us is it creates that space for all the different organisations to come together and to be a collective, critical voice on the issues, where we come out of our boxes on our specific issues, and we work collectively to see how can we come up with workable solutions. And we've been involved recently in a campaign for progressive tax reform, and it was in response to the government's claims that they had no choice in order to reduce the deficit, but to cut our way out of it, to cut public services, to reduce the incomes of the lowest paid by reducing the minimum wage and cutting social welfare, and by taxing the low paid. And we said, no, that is not true. There are alternatives. And we worked with Task to try to develop 4 workable solutions that would raise the 3 billion that they said was required back in August. And we worked with our members to try to lobby and campaign for that. And we really did, I suppose, there was huge learning for us. I suppose the extent to which the experts were surprised by our analysis because it was evidence-based. We worked with Michael Taft, an economist who's a member of Task, and he gave us all the backup to show how we could introduce a wealth tax. And we talked to different political parties and said, oh, it wouldn't work. And we said, why? We went through the detail. They didn't have the answers, and these were the experts. So I suppose it was huge learning for us in that. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about, I suppose, mobilising people and the opportunities for alternatives. We had said initially that I might talk a bit about the impact of the cuts, but I'm not going to go into that detail. But I suppose one thing that I'm struck by is the extent to which people who are experiencing unemployment, risk of homelessness, having their homes repossessed, vital services being cut, the extent to which they've internalised the blame for that. They've accepted the mantra that they're responsible now and they have to pay the price, and we're all sharing the burden. And I suppose it's that awful shame, and ultimately for some people it's the ultimate price of suicide and huge mental health problems. And I think that is what is so worrying at this current time. I don't think that there is any credible, workable alternative out there at the moment. I think Terry has some excellent ideas there. But I think that between all of us out there, we all have parts of the answer. And I think it's up to us to come together and to build on that knowledge and that expertise we have between us all, and to come up with credible alternatives that we can mobilise a critical mass of people behind and demand that from our politicians that they provided with us. And I suppose that is what's critical, is we have to mobilise people at a local level. We can't leave it to the experts. We've relied on experts for too many times in the past. We have to mobilise local people because they do know, ordinary people on the ground know what the issues are, they know what the impact is, and they have part of that answer. So, I suppose there are many different ways to achieve social change. We've seen in Libya and Egypt recently the mass demonstrations on the street. There's other ways as to trying to use the system to bring about reform. But I'm not going to go into detail on that. I'm just kind of going to talk more about how we might mobilise people to mobilise behind the alternative, the consensus. And I suppose that just to say what the consensus is, we all partied, we all have to pay, we're sharing the burden equally. There's no choice to the EU IMF deal, there's no choice but bail out the banks, and there's no choice but to cut our way out of the crisis. I don't accept that there are no choices, but I think the only way that we bring about real change is to mobilise people and inform people, help people to develop their own analysis around it, share knowledge amongst ourselves, and make it accessible. I think that's so important, is that the information is accessible, that it's relevant to people, they can relate it to their everyday lives. And I think that's the lesson from Argentina. People demanded it. People said enough is enough, and they told our politicians what they had to do. And that's when they started to get workable solutions. We have to build alliances. We have to build alliances at all kinds of levels. We have to build alliances between the local and the national. We have to build alliances across the sectors. Some of those alliances will be very natural types of alliances, people that we share very common values and ideas with. Others aren't as comfortable, they're more complex types of alliances. But I think what we have to focus on what we have in common, what our shared values are and our shared vision, and try not to focus so much on what divides us. We have to have long-term strategies and we have to have short-term strategies. And there'll be conflicts there and there'll be uncomfortable spaces where, yes, we don't want to compromise and we don't want to settle for less. But we have to get some wins for people. People are not going to stay involved if they don't start to see some kind of win, some kind of outcomes. Again, I suppose the learning from Latin America is that it's a slow process. Building a movement is very slow. We need to be patient. We need to bring people along with us. Otherwise, we're not going to get the critical mass that we need. I think particularly for us in the community sector, that we have a tendency to wait until all the conditions are right. We're very nervous about being ridiculed or about letting people down if we try to do something and it isn't successful. We set very high standards sometimes for ourselves, but I don't think we can wait until all the conditions are right. We have to trust ourselves. We have to have trusting relationships between each other, and we have to just give that kind of courage and encouragement to each other, and I suppose sometimes refrain. You know, I don't know, sometimes you wonder about Irish people, about the begrudgery, about the knocking down people for taking chances, for taking risks. I think we have to encourage people to do that, to voice what their ideas are and to share them. We need to be more on the offensive. Too often we're on the defensive, we're reacting to government ideas, government recommendations. We have to become more on the defensive. And I think that was our learning in relation to the tax campaign was, usually what we would do, we would try to argue why you can't cut services to the homeless, why you can't cut services to women's refuges. And we'd be trying to make really good arguments. So this time we took a different tack and we said, no, we're not going to fight for those scraps. We're going to see a different way, and we offered them solutions. I suppose that's it mainly in relation to trying to mobilise people. But I also wanted to talk a bit about the community sector, and I suppose what's happening there, and the extent to which the state is trying to depoliticise us and trying to silence us. The community sector has always been political, not party political, but political, in mobilising marginalised people to challenge structural inequality, to challenge poverty, not to just accept the blame and to feel that they have to just pull up their socks and all is equal and we have equal access and equal opportunity. So we've always played a role in that, in critiquing policies, government decisions, etc. But more and more there's a pressure on us just to go more into service delivery, delivering services to the poor. All very worthwhile work, I'm not saying that. But we need to have that critical voice. If we're not critiquing government policy, it's a loss to society. And I think some politicians did recognise that in the past. But now there's a fear. They don't want us articulating alternatives and challenging the government position. So in some sense, it's terrible what's happening. Our funding is being cut. The more vocal organisations are being silenced in that way by just having funding cuts. But I think we've responded positively in some ways in that we've opened up new spaces, such as Claiming Our Future, such as ERA, or new networks, new alliances such as that. And we're setting our own agenda. I think that was one of our faults in the past was we danced to their agenda, we attended their meetings, and we felt we were awfully busy, all very, very busy. But it was usually responding to the government agenda. Now we're setting our own agenda. And just around Claiming Our Future, it was in response to our sense right across the different sectors, the trade unions, the community sector, the faith leaders, the environmental sector, all feeling that we weren't achieving outcomes. We weren't having a space in that debate. So what's really good is that there are those new kind of movements out there, and I would encourage you to get involved. On the 9th of April here in Galway, Claiming Our Future are going to be organising a national event looking at income equality. We hear so much about minimum incomes, with no discussion about maximum incomes and the extent to which bonus culture have contributed to the current crisis. At the last event, one of the speakers said, we need to convince people that they deserve better. And I think that's where we need to start. Thank you very much.